And hello, everyone. It is time for Weather University. I'm your host, Matt DiNardo, but I never do this alone. You know, I always bring in my partner, my colleague, my friend, Jacqueline Waters. Jacqueline, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm doing well. First of all, I'm going to give you the biggest amount of praise I've ever given you.
Oh, wow. Is this recorded? It is.
It is recorded. I can record it, but it is live. Seriously, folks, the amount of work that Jacqueline has put into not only last week's episode, but this week's episode in general is incredible on tornadoes, tornado safety. And we're going to be talking about something that many of you might remember, or maybe you have seen the recent documentary on Netflix. That was your homework, as we talked about last week. So, Jacqueline, did you finish your homework?
I did.
Okay.
Last night. I almost forgot, and it wasn't that late. I was watching basketball. Of course, I'm beating you in the bracket.
But I give you a compliment, and you really
sorry.
It's all good.
But yeah, I did watch it, and it was very moving. That's like the one word I could think of.
So let's kind of reset. Again, we are talking about the Joplin tornado, May 2011. And about 2 weeks ago, Netflix came out with a documentary which profiled 5 people who survived the storm. And it's extremely interesting to watch from a science point of view. It is also tough to watch because it is real life, folks. And if you don't know about this storm, it was an EF5, tornado with a path length of 21 miles, a little bit more than that. And look at the wind speeds that were estimated by the damage, 225 to 250. Jacqueline, this was simply put, ginormous.
It was. I mean, and even just watching that documentary, you could see how many lives it impacted. I mean, how many lives, unfortunately, it took. And although it is hard to watch, I think it's important for all of us to watch because it happens. I mean, it's Mother Nature.
And understand that these folks, excuse me, I thought my phone was ringing there. These folks have and had ample warning, like 30 minutes to 45 minutes lead time that this was coming. But there is nothing you can do when it's a storm of this magnitude. Yes, they got in their safe place. Yes, I mean, they did everything they can. But, I mean, when you have the power of a tornado like this, it just wiped out. It was horrible, horrible scenes for sure.
It was. And I mean, there was a lot of parts of the movie that were in that restaurant. I forget what restaurant it was.
It was just a diner.
And they talk a lot about getting in their safe space, getting into basically that interior room. But I mean, when
you talk about the young kid who was working in the ice cream shop. They all got in the freezer. Correct.
Yep.
Because that was the safest place, right? I mean, and literally, I mean, he had grown up in Joplin all his life, and even he had said, "This doesn't look right." Like, you know, I mean, you grow up in the Midwest, there's a tornado sky, but when it doesn't look right, it's pretty incredible. You know? Yeah, for sure. All right, so this was part of a larger tornado outbreak on May 22nd, stretching from the UP of Michigan all the way down through Texas. And obviously, the main focal point that we're just talking about today. And folks, we're going to relate this to why this is important to us maybe today. But you can see that swath coming out of Kansas, going right into southwestern sections of Missouri, and those polygons there that are stretching right through Joplin, that was every tornado warning that led to this disasterful day.
Yeah, and I mean, it was the one thing I wanted to mention for those that didn't watch the movie. I think pretty much everyone interviewed in the documentary was high school students, right?
At that time. Or maybe just had graduated. I think was the group of 3 in the car.
Yes,
the
you're
lady
right. Okay.
and the 2. Yeah. But.
And I mean, there's a quote I actually wrote down. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, so as they're getting ready for graduation, I forget who said it, but they say the real world sucks sometimes. That's what they just learned at graduation.
Right.
And then 15 minutes after graduation, the real world hit them because Joplin, I mean, they were getting ready for those tornadoes coming through. And I mean, unfortunately, some people, they graduated with lost their lives, and
exactly.
their high school got demolished
completely.
It's just crazy.
Very, very tough. And again, that's the path that we are talking about here. Going to bring up a second set of graphics. And by the way, again, Jacqueline found all this stuff out and developed this. So Jacqueline, the bottom graphic, this is kind of a wherewithal of north to south of these tornadoes.
Yeah, so these are what we call local storm reports. Sometimes you might hear us say LSRs on air. Hopefully we don't. You guys, I'm in. Sometimes I do that by accident, but they're local storm reports from the Storm Prediction Center, and they show you basically how widespread the damage was from the Midwest all the way towards the South. And we're going to zoom into some of the actual reports from Joplin.
Right.
And it lines up with a lot of what they were saying in the movie also, with the roadway signs being demolished, cars being overturned, and it's just...
So this is the northern half. I think you have the clicker that allows us to kind of switch into the southern portions. Yeah, no problem. Because we have a lot of things working here, folks. We got a couple. So, and then takes us right down into central Missouri, and then southern Missouri, and of course down into Joplin. I mean, just unbelievable stuff. And then so Jacqueline found this file, and then found a way for our machines to parse the file, to then go ahead and break it down even further. I mean, again, the work you did, Jacqueline, was...
You don't know how many times the computer froze and crashed on me when I was making all
You're
this.
bringing in massive amounts of data, for sure. Right, 100%. I'm going to bring this back one full screen here so we can see what we're looking at. This one right here. There we go. So that's the high school.
Yes.
And this one is the main Joplin tornado kind of floating around it, if you will. And there's text there, so we'll bring this back up. 22nd and Black Cat Road neighborhood, massive damage being reported. These are real-time reports as they were happening. People trapped in debris. SGF 22nd and Black Cat neighborhood, massive damage reported to houses, trees with people trapped in. I mean, just incredible stuff. This was the first sign that this massive tornado had come into downtown Joplin.
And also there was a part of the movie, the documentary also, that it was the student, Will, who they couldn't locate. And his aunt was telling everyone, she went on the news and she's like, check your trees.
Right.
Hearing that, like just hearing some of these are real
verbiage.
life people that went through this storm.
Yep.
I'm fortunate enough to never have been through something like this. But it just really, that quote hit me, check your trees. Like that's just.
Again, correct, because these tornadoes grab and just dispersed everything. You know, debris was found miles and miles away. And unfortunately, I'm not being grim that I want to be, but a person's body becomes debris in a storm like this. And it's horrible to think of it that way. But that's why she's saying, check your trees. They later found Will in a lake or pond several miles away, several days later, unfortunately. So just tough stuff there. So that was one storm report. Another storm report that came in, here we go. Multi-vortex tornado reported. Okay, so I think we need to step back here so people understand what a multi-vortex tornado is. So this, in extremely big and powerful tornadoes, you sometimes have multiple tornadoes or multiple vorticities wrapping around the main one. And that's how well defined this was. So really, really incredible stuff here. Numerous homes.
And this was just one mile south of Joplin.
Right.
So very, very close to the high school as well.
Correct. And then finally, another one. The report came in, and this was early on.
Yes, this was early on. That's important to note because we know the death toll went up to, depending on where you look, I noticed this because in the movie, I think they said 158.
That's the number I've always heard.
I saw reports of 161. Some are years later, some sort of relation to it. But yeah.
Yeah. But at the time, I mean, the initial assessment going through after 122 fatalities, just massive. And there's a scene in the movie, and we're not trying to give it away, where Mike Bettis, who is a Weather Channel reporter, live on scene, one of the first national reporters live on scene, broke down crying because of what he was seeing.
I started crying,
It's
actually.
tough. It's because you don't expect, as meteorologists, to see damage end death like that. And I'm sure that's what we all know, that's what he was seeing. And thankfully they edited that portion out of it. But I'm sure there was a lot of unpleasant things, to be seen, right?
Yeah, so, that was hard.
Yeah. 2 miles east of Joplin, the storm continues. Mile marker 10 and 12. Trees stripped of, think about that. Stripping the bark off of trees, 20 semis, and they showed this as they were driving through the town. Semis overturned all over the place along I-44. This was incredible stuff.
And there was, I believe it was that group of three. Steven, the friend, got sucked out of the car.
Through the sunroof.
Yes.
Yeah. And then another one, the other friend, out of the door.
Yep. And there was Steven ended up, and sorry if you guys haven't watched, just mute it right now. But Steven did end up surviving.
Yeah.
And he ended up having a family. That I love that part of the movie.
Correct.
But his friends, I mean, he was in a coma for a while. And then something that I learned in the movie, I didn't realize there was a flesh-eating, what was it called? Flesh-eating fungus.
Yeah, flesh-eating bacteria fungus, yeah. So
where he lost a lot of his...
Right. So part of that was because it had picked up, and again, quote me if I'm wrong here, or stop me if I'm wrong here, but it picked up so much of bad bacteria in water, and then that stuff mixes with sewage and stuff flying, and now it gets into your skin. Yeah, just horrible.
Just horrible. I mean, but this report specifically is the one that, like, I feel like in the movie, like, this is what we kind of saw, what we heard about a lot. A lot of people on the roads because graduation parties maybe. And unfortunately, this tornado went through a pretty big portion of town, like straight through town. Straight through town,
for sure. You mentioned graduation. So part of the story takes place, these kids, as you said, were graduating, and 2 hours later, dealt with the most real-life situation they could ever be. Storm survey completed later on determined at the end.
Yes.
Downgraded to an EF2.
Yes.
So again, most of the path, this is EF5.
It says it's 5 miles east-northeast of Diamond. And you can see, I guess, what is that left on your screen? Joplin, all the way on the left. Is it mirrored for everyone? I don't know.
So it's when you look at the screen, it's on the left-hand side of the screen.
Closer to Matt, you could see Joplin over there. So it's at the end of the path, basically.
That way.
I don't know where my fingers are pointing.
It's always tough to do. That's when we're totally backward like this. All right, so let's talk about this. This is a cool thing that I found. So this is a high-res satellite picture, and the blue that you see, that stripe from Gregg all the way south of Duquesne, north of Rec City, that's the actual path of destruction. And then all the other spots of blue are all the other tornadoes that happened during that same time that just touched down and lifted up, But the other one through the HS, which is the high school that Jacqueline put on there, that's the path. So, I mean, of the main tornado. So you could see you had the main path, and then you had all these other areas that were hit just as bad due to these tornadoes dropping on in. So I thought that was pretty cool. And again, there's the overall path length. All right, so that gives you kind of a breakdown of what's...
And Mia, there's a few people joining us. Thank you for everyone for joining us. Good morning, Bobby. Mia said that the thing that broke her down was the hospital being taken out. So, yeah, it wasn't just the high school. Many, large buildings were just demolished. But, yeah, so it was the EF5 tornado. And it's basically categorized by the enhanced Fujita scale. And obviously, different than hurricanes, we can't really... use a lot of weather tools in tornadoes because it would just be torn apart, and usually the National Weather Service office has to go out and survey the damage after. So this is what scale they use, and you can see EF5 over 200 miles per hour, those 3-second wind gusts, which could completely take away a building. In this case, it was a high school, hospital, many other buildings, and trees just uprooted.
It's gone. I mean, completely. And there were places where this was the foundation of a house, and there was no house. There wasn't a brick left. So pretty crazy stuff. So the enhanced Fujita scale came in about 20 years ago, replacing the Fujita scale, which was a little bit more robust in the winds. Back then it would have been an F5. I think again at about 250 miles per hour or 235. So this kind of changed things down a little bit. And really what they do, as you said, is they go in and look at the damage and then can go backward and assess what the winds were based on the damage. So pretty interesting stuff. And of course, we are able to use radar technology.
Yes.
We talked about this last week, Doppler radar, the velocities to see what the speeds are in and away from the radar, and then to the radar that gives us our couplet, that gives us a starting point as well.
Exactly.
So pretty important stuff. All right, many different parts of a supercell thunderstorm. And Jacqueline, let's go through some of this stuff here.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of times we don't really see supercells.
Correct.
But supercells are very common in Tornado Alley and where a lot of portions where these tornado outbreaks happen. And they're one of my they're my favorite storms as a meteorologist. I obviously don't like when they happen and they cause damage, but they're just so complex. So I figured we would just break it down. There's a lot of different portions of it. We have our hail core, which we use not just reflectivity. In this case, like when you see those bright pinks and purples, it could indicate a hail core, but also we use those other meteorological tools like correlation coefficient to see how uniform basically the things in the cloud are, and we have to use a lot of different things to see where that hail core is. You have heavy rain, which we know is those bright colors. You have your leading edge. You'll have like a gust front or outflow boundary, basically just strong winds coming out of the downdraft, warm surface winds rotating in, and debris ball is something we talk a lot about. Usually you see we call it correlation coefficient in meteorology. It shows how uniform or not how uniform things are up in the sky, and if we're seeing it's bright blues, I guess. It's a bunch of different colors.
Bright blues indicate then
on our scale.
Yeah, on our scale, some really, really nasty stuff in the air that is not rain and or ice.
Yeah.
It's trees or leaves or whatever, brick, that kind of stuff. So yeah, pretty crazy stuff for sure. Yeah. This is a well-defined storm. And you're right, we don't really see supercells here in Virginia. We do get, obviously, tornadoes, and that leads us to a little bit of kind of the discussion of how tornadoes form. So you often hear Jacqueline and myself, JB, talk about wind shear. That is wind going in opposite directions or in different directions, let's say. And so we're using this kind of horizontal setup here. So you see winds going east and west, right? From the east, from the west. That's the kind of the setup of opposing winds. And then what'll start to happen is we'll start to get a little bit of upward rotation, which is our updrafts or our downdrafts in thunderstorms. That starts to mix those opposing winds or the shear, and then you get this kind of better rotation that will start to, quote unquote, stand on its head, if you will, go vertical. And this then is when our Viper real-time radar, our Doppler radar, starts to see winds coming toward the radar or away from the radar. That gives us our couplet. That gives us our, hey, look at this. This is what we're watching when we show you velocity on the radar. That then could drop a funnel cloud, and when that funnel cloud touches the ground, it then becomes a tornado or a cyclone. So there's many different facets to it, but it all starts from opposing winds or wind shear, and then the standard updrafts and downdrafts in any thunderstorm help to start to move it vertically, and that's what we're looking at there. So really wide, but it takes perfect conditions to get that. Then, Jacqueline, in our system, and you understand this really well, we have something called shear rate. Explain what this really is.
Yeah, so this is really helpful. We use it a lot. You see us use it a lot on air. I always try to tell everyone what I'm looking at and what numbers we don't want to see. But basically, it just shows us that area of rotation. And when we call it like the slithery snake.
Silly snake, yeah.
When it starts to get that S shape, that's not what we want to see, because that shows that rotation is really tightening. But it basically just helps us show where an area is rotating. And the more brown, I guess that's brown, red brown, brick brown.
Yeah, brown, maroon, and then into yellows.
Yeah, that is indicating stronger shear. And usually you see us pixel query it a lot. And that's really, I mean, when I pixel query it, it's more for my own good because it's in, what is it, meters per second per kilometer.
Right.
It's all this math coming together. It's hard to understand, but we understand it. We went to school for it. But anything over 10 meters per second per kilometer is usually showing some signs of rotation, something we're watching. Anything over 15 is very bad. That's for our area specifically.
Yeah, for sure.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, 100% right. Yep. So, I mean, we start to see that. So this is really, you said a couple of words there. So for our viewers at home, pixel querying, that's when we can take the physically, you see it as a dropper, like an eyedropper in our tools, and we can touch something and get a number value on it. And so that's what pixel querying is. And that's a way for us to get a query, an understanding of what that data is, and show it on air. And you're right, anything over 10 presents for us in this area the possibility of rotation. Anything greater than 15, rotation is definitely happening, and whether that rotation is going to touch the ground or not, that's when we start to look at 20s and 30s, and we have seen that before. This is really cool because this is a product that we have that nobody else has in the area, and the reason why is this is a product specific to the development of the dual pole that the company, Barron, that we have as our weather system developed. And they're looking at this rotation in the lowest level of the sky. So it's a really quick early scan, but it's the one that's the most changeable, and it allows us to really see what's going on before things are dropping. And we have been on the air numerous times where we are looking at something, starting to see this develop, this S as you call it, right? You see that there in that last picture under extreme. And we're like, we think this is dropping, the potential of a rotation or, maybe a tornado. And we'll continue to focus in on that and do some storm tracking. And about 5 to 10 minutes later, we may get a warning from that. So we're advanced warning because we don't issue the warnings. The National Weather Service does. But we're looking ahead and we're really identifying what we don't like. Now, sometimes they fizzle out, but a lot of times they start to hold together. Yeah.
And for our area, a lot of times, like the first time, I think you were in Alaska. It was I forget what hurricane it was, but we had that tornado threat, and I was able to use shear rate, and I was able to have it mic'd up and be ready before they even issued the warning.
Right.
Because I saw it turning into that S. I saw it, those browns and those yellows coming out, and I'm like, oh, this is not looking good. And a lot of times also we don't see a lot of things on our velocity.
Correct.
Whether it be storm relative velocity, which basically just takes out that storm motion, or just regular base velocity, because
Storms
we
are
just
moving too
don't.
fast,
They're low top, high shear, and shear rate really comes in handy.
Yep, it sure does. Okay, so where does that take us today? It takes us today to the fact that we have the potential for severe weather here. If you've been watching Jacqueline from yesterday morning, Tyler last night, me this morning, it is a Viper alert day. Now, there is some good news in this severe weather setup for today. The ingredients are there, but they're not as strong as what they were yesterday. So the level of severity has come down, specifically in hail and the tornadic threat. Look, one tornado is bad enough, right? So, but there were some indications yesterday that this could have been a pretty decent tornado outbreak for us. That has been rolled back. We really think that with the sunshine out there now, and that's kind of an issue, we might be looking at more of developing storms with damaging winds, winds in excess of 60 miles per hour, which is what you've been high on most of the time since yesterday.
Yes. So we were under that. The SPC had us under that 10% for tornado, which I just wasn't convinced on. I didn't really see all the ingredients coming together. But also heavy downpours. I know we've been dry, so we do need some rain. That will help. But I just think it's going to come down in buckets right away. And with it coming in for across the metro area around the evening commute home, especially 6 p.m. if you're heading out, I think it could cause some ponding on the roadways, which could cause issues.
Yeah, that always causes big-time traffic problems and stuff like that. So where is what we're looking at? Well, it's not the stuff you saw just fizzle out, but look at how big that gap is in the satellite showing all that sunshine. We're going to warm up into near 85 today. It's going to be unbelievable. It's going to feel like a summer day. But that cold front now that's working into West Virginia, that's what's going to fire up in the warm, and I would dare to say slightly humid air.
I would say
Dew points highs are in the 60s this morning, so it's kind of like, wow, this feels a little bit more summer-like. So let's go to Futurecast. Here we go. 6 p.m. this evening, Farmville to Powhatan, back up to Louisa County. Here comes our line. Now, what I've done here is I've also put on the storm energy. This is like, hey, I've got all the ingredients together, and so I'm baking my cake, and then the cake is the line of storms you see. So you got to have all the energy first. Otherwise, no energy, no storms. We get to around 7, 8 o'clock, and those storms are pushing right in here and moving through. So as Jackie said, back end of that evening commute, 7, 8 o'clock, heavy downpours, ponding of water, localized flash flooding, localized street flooding, a good bet. Also damaging winds, 60 miles per hour. And again, maybe some small hail, maybe a tornado, but again, that risk is lower, but it's still there. It's a low risk, not a non-risk.
Yes.
And then we get past 10 p.m., and they have cleared the East Coast, maybe down toward Virginia Beach, Norfolk. The Tidewater is still having some showers and storms, and then boom, after midnight, all clear for everybody, and tomorrow we're back to sunshine and a great-looking day. Look at this 8-day forecast. 65 tomorrow, which, by the way, is the average high now for this time of year.
Yes.
And we were 64, 65 to start the day this morning. So
I know.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, all weekend long.
It was so nice.
Our lows only went down. I woke up sweating one of the mornings because I fell asleep with the windows open.
Right.
But we woke up every day with temperatures with our normal highs.
It's crazy. 70 on Wednesday, partly sunny. Thursday, kind of like yesterday, a mix of clouds and sunshine. Warm, 84. Friday, opening day of Richmond Flying Squirrels. Some showers. I think we get the game in, 86 degrees. And then this weekend, it's a couple of hit and miss showers, maybe a rumble of thunder, both Saturday and Sunday. Not the biggest of deals, mid-70s and then upper 60s, I should say. The one thing, Jack, everybody felt it this weekend. The pollen was insane.
Yeah.
Today's rain will help out for the afternoon, but come tomorrow, boom, it's back up
yeah.
again. Yeah. It's been tough.
Yeah, that has been tough.
It's been tough. Once again, Jacqueline, I'm just going to... Great work on all of the graphics.
Thank you.
And putting this together. And I like the kind of the retrospect that we did there on the Joplin tornado because it is a storm gone down in history and will forever be studied.
My birthday back in 2011. I'll never forget it. May 22nd. Do
sure.
you have any final thoughts? I feel like I shared a lot of my thoughts about the...
I actually thought this was a well-done documentary. I think if you haven't seen it yet, you should see it. I think, the perspective of... the loss of life, despite having the warnings, is something that everybody should understand. We do the best we can to warn ahead of time. The National Weather Service does. We try to relay that message out there. But there are things that are above our ability.
Yes.
And that was one of them for sure.
We didn't, there's one other thing I have in my notes.
Yeah.
Do you remember Jack? I love that part of it. He was so interested in meteorology. He was the young kid. And he reached out to all these TV meteorologists. And I think he was 13 when he went there. And there was one meteorologist, I forget his name off the top of my head. He was the chief meteorologist at WD something. Oh, I forget. But it's in the documentary, and he's a meteorologist today.
It's awesome.
And that's why I love what I do. I know you love what you do. We go to schools, and it's just, it's exciting to educate people on what our passion is.
It is very, very cool for sure. All right, with that, Jacqueline, it is now 10 after 11. You've got to get ready for the noon news.
I do. Thank you.
And we want to thank you all for joining us once again on this edition of Weather University. Jacqueline, next week, are we doing...
I think hail and lightning.
Hail and lightning. Hail and lightning. Severe weather. Part 3.
No homework. Other than stay safe today.
Stay safe today. Right. Have a great one, everyone.